Well, good day, everybody in the podcast world, and we're so glad that you are joining us today for Up and to the Right. Whether you're watching this or you're listening, we are thrilled that you have chosen to spend some time with us, and I hope that you are encouraged, built up in your faith, learned something new, and just also today, celebrate with us, okay? And speaking of today, at this moment, at this recording, this podcast, we as a city and as a state have been celebrating the newly crowned champions of NBA basketball. Okay, that is our Oklahoma City Thunder. And so some of you have just come from a parade. I know that we allowed our staff off today till 1 o'clock, and so that they could be a part of the celebration along with thousands upon thousands of others that have rejoiced and celebrated in the accomplishments of the Oklahoma City Thunder. And today I'm glad to have with me two great individuals that I love and appreciate very much, and that is Vélez and Zack Anderson. Good to have you both.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thanks for having us.
So just real quickly, I would like our audience to get a better understanding of who I'm talking to right now and who is joining us today. Zack, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, okay? Tell us about your family, about you, how long you've been at North Church, what you do at North Church.
Yeah, my name is Zack Anderson. I've been at North Church for 13 years. My wife, Kayla Anderson, serves on staff. She helps Shannon with the women's ministry, and I serve up in North Kids. Been doing that for going on 4 years now. So have two kids, Titus and Zola, 9 and 6. They're the joys of our lives, trying to just keep up with them on a daily basis.
Yay. Christian, how about you?
So I'm the group's pastor here at North Church. I've been at North Church full-time for 7 years, attending a year prior to that. And Natalie and I have a beautiful baby girl. Her name is Isla Rose. She's a wild, crazy child that we love, but it keeps us in our toes. People say that the first child, it normally tricks you to have another one. We're going to have another one, but I don't think things can get any crazier than Isla. But we both are part of our North groups. I lead North groups, and I have the opportunity also to help you, Pastor Rodney, with teaching on Sunday mornings and our residency program at our church.
Yeah, I know. So I'm thank you for joining us today. I picked you guys because I know that you have not only a deep interest and excitement about basketball, specifically our Thunder, but then also knowledge of the team. And we're going to talk today. We're going to celebrate.
Yeah.
We're going to reflect on this last year, and maybe you can reflect on even past years, but specifically this year to kind of reflect and rejoice, maybe just kind of recall some of the moments that you've been in the stadium and rejoiced and stuff. And then we're going to switch gears after that. We're going to talk a little bit about some principles that we can take from this year. Okay. What are some things that maybe we have learned from, whether that be the founders, CEO, whether that be from Sam Presti, general management, the coach, head coach, or coaches, and also for sure the players who actually get on the court and make it happen. And so we're going to hopefully apply these principles. This is not meant to endorse individuals or the organization or all choices. That's not it. But we want to learn from successful organizations. We want to learn from those who are doing things right, who have accomplished wins, and see how we can apply those to our lives, whether that be our business, whether that be our home, relationships, raising children, whatever that may be, because a lot of the things that you see in somebody else that are principles that helped create wins and championships are easily transferable to other areas of our life. So, okay. Hey, let's just start off talking about this year. All right. Let's kind of celebrate the Thunder and some of the things that you remember, the highlights, the journey throughout this year. We'll start with Zack. Zack, give us some thoughts.
Man, I think for me, it was like it started before the year started, even like in the summer when they went and got Caruso and got Hartenstein. Last year, I think as we've seen this team progress, it felt like this year was like, okay, we have all the pieces we need. And obviously you have to play the year out, and here we are in hindsight. But I just think at the beginning of the year, I was like, it felt different. It felt like there's an anticipation that like there's expectation, I guess, if you will, of like we have the right pieces, we have the superstars, we have the young guys, but we also have the role guys that fit, and like we have a big guy now. And so I think for me that was like what I looked forward to most of the season. It was really exciting. Is I think there's always in sports, there's always the best teams, and there's always teams that are like, oh, contenders, but really do they have what it takes to compete? And I felt like going into this year, I was super excited because I felt on paper we'd had everything we needed to win a championship, and here we are celebrating that.
Yeah, I agree with what Zach is saying. I think from the beginning of this season, I think Oklahoma City felt different. I think Oklahoma City were expecting like this could be the year. That's why you heard people saying, because once, in 2012, we had KD, we had Russell, we had Harden, and people always say Oklahoma City missed it, trading Harden out. Now, I think that this year we just felt different as a city, and we were like, we had what we didn't have in 2012, which it's a team that really roots in one another and cheer one another. And the whole city, I think we're expecting like, this is our year. Like we're winning from the beginning of the season, from the beginning of the playoffs. I was so confident we're going to get to the final, and people are not, you're crazy. When this final started, we're winning. Does not matter if we win 3 games, we're winning, because it just felt that this organization it's in a different place 17, 18 years later than when it first came to Oklahoma City. And I don't know, I just feel like from the beginning of this season, our city was like, this is our year.
So over the course of the season, are there any moments that you feel like, wow, that was a significant moment for us? That was a turning point, or that was, or maybe it was in you being in the stadium and feeling the moment, and like, is there anything that stands out to you in this season?
Yeah, I have one, and it may sound weird, but if you remember in the NBA Cup when they lost in the championship, if you remember, they were playing really, really well at that time. We only had a couple of losses, and they got worked in that championship game.
Yeah.
And for me, as like playing sports growing up and playing in college and everything, I was like, this could be like a silver lining. Yes, I wanted to win the game, but I was like, this should bring them down to earth and make them realize like, hey, we got to stay locked in. We got to stay focused. Like if we want to hit our goals, like it will be hard. But I always think it's good for teams to like have those moments to where like you kind of have a reality check of like, hey, we can't, get a big head or whatever. And so I felt like that was one of the moments I would distinctively remember. Hey, we lost this game, but I hope it was an experience that maybe we needed, and it kept them rooted in like what was working. And I felt like it kept the momentum, where sometimes, you win a bunch and then it gets to a point where you're like trying not to lose, where I feel like when you have those losing moments, it always helps you refocus. And so that was one that stood out for me specifically.
Yeah. I think that for me, one of the things that I noticed that it was different about not only this year, but the team that we have, whether they won or lost, every time that they were interviewed, they never ride when they were highs, they never ride them for too long, or the lows either for too long. Every time, whether they won or lose, they were always looking for ways to improve. They were celebrating one another. And those interviews, I really enjoy them. I think I was criticized a lot for people from my friends that are not from Oklahoma City. And they always saying, why is your team acting like children when they're interviewing them? And I always like, this is what makes this team so different, that they are comfortable with who they are, and they are not riding the highs very high or the lows very low. And you saw that in interview after interview, they were always, we won by 30 points, but we got to improve in our defense, or we got to improve in our turnovers. And that to me was like, that is just a different mentality, where a lot of times people are always looking, we did great, there's one thing or two that we can improve. But for them at that young age, they were always looking for ways to improve.
You said it well. They're children. They really are children.
They are.
What they are. They're young. They were growing up. Like, I like that.
I think that we expect for a lot of time professional players to act like professionals, but they are children. They're 22, 21, 23 years old, that they are trying to learn how to play at a high level, carry themselves in a high level. And I think that what made this team different is that our front office and our head coach allowed them to act that way, that made a huge difference in our team.
Both of you kind of called out a couple of experiences. And for me, I've even discussed this with Zach multiple times of how we were blowing people out. But really, how about a close game? How are we going to respond when it's down to the wire the last little bit? And we saw us toward the end of the regular season lose a couple of those games that were really close at the end, nip and tuck type games. And we're like, okay. And I think it was a great opportunity for the coach to learn as well as the players to learn. And coach being able to realize, okay, here's what we need to do, because really they weren't tested much throughout the year. They did have some games they lost. A couple of those were really when they were shorthanded too. They lost some players in the middle of a game, and they weren't ready for that. And those are understandable. But I really feel like that they learned in those close games how to win. They actually went back and just said, okay, we've got to be able to learn how to win close games and not just blow people out all the time, because eventually that's not going to happen, especially when you get into the playoffs and you're playing against mature teams that know how to step it up to a whole nother level in those games. And so they really did. They learned how to win the close ones. And to me, that was something that stood out.
And they had to learn that pretty quickly, because throughout the season, I think we won by 12.9 points or something like that, a wild stat, largest in NBA history. When you get to the playoff, things are different. And we didn't, like you said, we did not have many games where they were close, and they learned how to, a lot of teams learn how to win close games because they're always winning by a close margin, but we did not have that. We will, if we most of the games that we lost by 2 to 4 points in the regular season, then in the playoffs, we were having several of those. And I feel like every time that they lost a game, like against the Pacers, I think it was game 1, 0.3 seconds. That was the only lead that they had, was at the end. But they've been doing that all playoffs. We didn't do that. So I think it was really cool to see how they adjusted in the following game, and they had to learn that very quickly, and they adopted, because I think it's in that pressure that you have to perform. People say it often, pressure is a privilege. Well, that was not a privilege that we had for a long time. And in the playoff, we saw those young guys adjusting, leaning on one another, and that's how we were able to win those close games.
So just talk to me a little bit about the players themselves. Okay. Now let's just kind of let's take SGA out of the conversation a bit. Obviously, in fact, I'm wearing a shirt that somebody gave to me this week. I'll show this off to everybody.
Come on.
And this was a statement that SGA made, which was so powerful, that resonated with so many people about my whole life, is consistency. And I think it's very, very, very important. And so obviously, his year is going to go down as one of the greatest of all time. And also this team is going to go down as one of the greatest all time. You can't finish the 6th best record, I think, of all time. I think that's correct. But yet the win differential, the most points ever scored by a team, which is crazy to consider. Oh, and those points, the win differential is better than any other team in the history of the NBA, which you've already mentioned that, Christian. But I want you to stop and think about, other than SGA, what players kind of stood out to you? Okay, maybe you can do 1 or 2 players that just really, and why? Why was it that they stood out to you? What did they contribute that made such a big difference in the team? And so, Zach, how about you? Start with you and pick out 1 or 2 players.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's J-Dub and Caruso. J-Dub, I think, as a 12th pick, when we drafted those two, Chet's the guy. Chet's the unicorn. He's the real tall guy, and everybody had this expectation. And J-Dub, it was like, we'll see. And after year 1, it was like, oh, this guy's good. And he took a leap, and then year 2, he took another leap. And I think this year, I had the expectation, if we needed to win a championship, it was going to be Chet that's going to have to take this ginormous leap. And all of a sudden, like, Shea now has got Robin. He's got a Scott, over the last couple of days, he's got Scottie Pippen next to him. Like, he's got a bona fide superstar next to him. And so that was impressive to see like where he's come from, a small D1 in Santa Clara, and watch him blossom into an all-star, all NBA defender, like all NBA second, third team. Like, I mean, he's great. And where they got him and just him not being that coming out of college. I even heard a thing with him during the finals. I think it was when they won the Western Conference Finals. They asked him about it. How did it feel? And he was like, man, this feels good. He's like, I've never won anything. He's like, I've always been the guy who's just like on the teams that get blown out and all this stuff. And so that was just cool to see, like a guy like him where, and a lot of those guys on this team have that story, but just a smaller, not a top recruit and stuff like that. And just in 3 years turn into a all NBA player. So, I mean, that was obviously, I think, instrumental for this team kind of getting to where they were. And then Caruso, as I mentioned earlier, he to me is the guy who he's done it before. He was on that Laker championship team. Yep. He's the voice in the locker room that can keep those guys accountable. He's the grandpa in the room they call, and he's only like 30 years old, but he's the one that has the experience. And I think you saw that during the season. He didn't necessarily have any outstanding games during the regular season, but man, came playoff time, he was the one that was like in those moments, like who else are we going to get something from? It's boom. Caruso has this huge game. I think I heard a stat where he had scored 20 points 5 times in his entire career, and he had 2 of them in the NBA Finals for us this year. So I mean, like his best basketball we just witnessed, in his entire career, and he's been in the league a while. So I think just like to win a championship, you typically have to have guys that step up or play out of body experiences or just grow a ton. And I think those 2 guys are the 2 that, like, obviously Shai's Shai, but those 2 guys were monumental in our season.
Not for me, and I would go with the same 2 that Zack talked about. I think Caruso I was there on Game 7 and just see him coming on, understanding his role, hitting some big threes, defending big time. But just to pick 2 other ones, I would think for me, it was Cason Wallace, young kid out of Kentucky, has a huge task. He was guarding Siakam in the final game. I mean, throughout the season, throughout the playoffs. But just for him, go in there several minutes, guard the biggest guy, honestly, their biggest star, and I believe Cason Wallace, maybe 21, 22 years old, hitting big threes, on incredible defense. I think just those, we always think about SGA being the man, right? But I think SGA has done probably the best job in NBA history on celebrating the teammates. Not only J-Dub, but celebrating everyone in the team. This morning, as I was watching the parade, and when they are in the arena and they're interviewing him, he grabbed the whole team to be behind him in the interview, because he's just showing, yeah, I might be the MVP, but I will not be without this, guys. But I think Cason Wallace did an incredible job. And also, Chet to me was just, man, that guy, yes, he had a few games that he didn't play as good, but learn from the mistakes. And you didn't see Chet having 2 bad games. If they stop him one game, he figure out the following game.
Yeah, Chet was big.
Those are great. For Chet, offensively, he didn't really perform during the finals, but defensively, still, his presence made all the difference.
Yeah.
I really like all those guys you mentioned. There's so many that could be brought up here, but I want to call out 2 guys that I'm a little biased toward a little bit, and they don't even start, and they didn't even get to play hardly in the NBA Finals. Matter of fact, I think one of them, or I don't know if they got to play very many minutes at all. I'm trying to think exactly what is the other Williams.
They will.
And then Isaiah Joe. I think both of those guys throughout the year. And the reason why I point them out is, number one, I'm a little biased because they grew up just a few miles from my house. Okay. And they played at Fort Smith, North Side, which is 10 miles from where I grew up. And there's connections there, relationships that I have back in the day that they're connected with, family and friends. So it's that relationship a little bit. But number 2 is just the energy that they always brought to the team. And I think even though that they were on the bench, they're no less valuable. And in fact, Williams stepped in so many times throughout the year when we were in desperate need, either Chet down, Hardenstein down, or and we really needed somebody to step in, and he was the man. He was key so many times for wins, in my opinion, that helped push us up to be able to get that number one overall seed.
Yeah.
And then obviously Isaiah Joe just really performed throughout the year. And again, those guys might not have been the key guys during the playoff run, specifically the finals. But you know what? It's no less significant, the impact that they had on the team. And I'm bringing that up because sometimes we may feel like we're left out watching, but the truth of the matter is cheering on the sidelines, slapping them on the back. I mean, they always had this huge smile on their face and was always the first one out on the court to just begin to cheer the team on. And that is every bit as important as the one that is defending, rebounding, and getting the buckets. And so I just really want to celebrate them. And of course, there's others too on the team. But those two stood out for me for those reasons that I just mentioned. So let's talk a little bit about some specific things that we noticed or that you noticed. I did this with the staff this past week on Monday after the championship on Sunday. And I have a whole list here of things that they mentioned that we can learn from this organization, that we can learn from the coach, that we can learn from the management, that we can learn from the players. What is it that you noticed? Maybe it's a certain thing that stood out that are principles that can apply to our lives, whether we are running a business, whether we are just, a work-at-home mom that's managing the home and 3 crazy children, whether that's having a healthy marriage, whether that's being able to lead a North group. What is it that you noticed in this organization as a whole that stood out to you that can help us be a success and a champion in life?
It's a really good question. I have 2 things I think that stand out for me, and I've actually thought about this. It's a great question. One of them I didn't think about till today, being at the parade. And so if you went to the parade, if you're listening to this, like before they got to the players, I mean, there were buses and flatbed trucks of staff, of people in the organization, Sam Presti, the owners, the coaches, just and their families, and those are the people who support them. And so like the more you saw it just being down there in real time, you're like, this takes a village. Like, yes, these guys get the glory, the players on the floor, but in order for this organization to run, in order for somebody to sell me tickets so I can show up and cheer them on, somebody has got to be in the front office and like recruiting and trying to get ticket sales, and somebody's got to work the concessions. It was really cool to see, and it was like a visual representation of like, we all hear that, but like I think in life, like it takes a village. I think God in Scripture clearly calls us to community, but I even think in sports you can see it when a team wins and organizations are successful in the business world. Like we see a lot of times, or like you even mentioned earlier, you kind of glorify the people who are at the top. And those are the people that people notice, and man, I want to be like them, but like they can't do that without the supporting people around them. And so today that was really cool. That's something that stood out for me, is like lean into your village. If you don't have one, get a village, because that's what it takes. In order to be successful, it's going to take that. And then I think the second thing was like this team, I think, is really unique in a way. And I think Christian mentioned this earlier, like from 2012 to this team, like we were super talented back then, but you can see it. It's different. The interviews are different. The camaraderie is different. Like they hang out, they truly are like buddies and friends, and that helps on the court. But I think that gets you so much farther off the court and supporting each other. And there's just, I've been a part of, played college sports, and I've been a part of teams who had all the talent in the world. But the teams that were the best were also the closest off the court. Those are the ones that always played, like we hung out together and we did all of the things together. And so like, and I even think about that in organizations too. Like I've worked for a Fortune 500 company for a long time, and like we've had our ups and downs in that. But I think when the company has been at its best is when they really lean into supporting each other, leaning into culture, leaning into to like having the camaraderie. Because no matter what it is, whether it's sports, whether it's business, whether it's church, whether it's my family, like that stuff matters. Because like at the end of the day, we're all working towards a goal. And when we're all on the same page, not just in the task, but also in all the other things, it just makes achieving your goals so much easier. So those are probably the two things for me, is just like the togetherness they have across the slate, and then it takes a village.
Yeah, I think for me, two things that I think make this team totally different than the teams that we have had before. I think this is a team that really trusts the process. I think Oklahoma trusted the Thunder in this process. We're talking about the trades that Sam Presti did when he traded Paul George and Russell Westbrook. We were a little confused. We're like, what is happening? Where are we going from here? And but we had to trust the process. They have trusted the process as an organization. It took time. You mentioned this in our Monday, how when he brought SGA, he also brought Chris Paul. And now when you mentioned this in our Monday morning, I'm like, maybe that was why he brought Chris Paul. Now, Chris Paul was older, incredible player. We know how the talent that he has, but probably why he brought Chris Paul, being one of the best point guards in the history of the NBA, was to train SGA to be that guy, to be that point guard. And it was many years where we barely won any games. And then we saw them climbing up and climbing up and climbing up. And now Sam Presti might go into the Hall of Fame with how he came up with all these picks. When you think about all the picks that we have for the future, this organization is set up. But 4 or 5 years ago, Sam Presti looked like a clown. Like, what is he doing? What is he going to do with all of those first round picks? I remember hearing talk shows talking about those things. But I think that this team has really trusted the process in order for you to win, you don't win overnight. And if you win overnight, you're not going to be able to do that again and again and again, like we're probably set up as an organization. Leading a small group is the same way. If you don't trust the process, if you just want something big really quickly, you're not going to be able to develop a good group or the culture of your group and figure it out how to ask the right questions and how to host people in your house. I think it's something you have to trust the process, and we can learn a lot from this team when it comes to, we're going to trust the process of this organization. We understand there's going to be hardship. We understand that things are not going to go how we want it, but we're going to continue to get better every single day, every single time. And I believe in ministry, in life, in our businesses, we're not always going to be on a peak. Actually, I was watching a show recently about NASCAR, and one of the guys said, in this sport, you lose more than you win. But they show up every single race like they're going to win the race. And that's how we have to show up at work. That's how we have to show up in our small group. Like, we are going to win when we show up, when we go to work, when we do this thing. So I think this is something that these guys, they show up like they were going to win every single time. If they won, they celebrated the people around them. If they lose, they took the ownership and got better and better every time. I think that's something that we can really, really learn from this team. And the other thing I would say is, they really celebrated one another. They trust the process. They celebrated one another. If J-Dub had a great game, he will always point at Chet. If Chet had a great game, he will point at Harnstein. They're always, I think that's culture. That is not something that they just show up at the Thunder and they all had that. No. I feel like these are the coaching staff that are training this young team to have the mentality of a winning team, but understand, like, this is what it's going to require for us to have this type of culture. Being in Game 7, I shared this with our staff on Monday. One thing that really caught my attention, Mark is our head coach, right? He's the guy making the hard calls. He's the guy calling the plays and all of that. But Mark also trusted the other coaching staff. So as I'm watching the bench, SGA is looking at the other coaches that are telling them what to do, to the point that even when the Pacers were taking a free throw, there is a coach lining them up where they need to be. And you saw that coach standing up and the players were like waiting for their instructions. And I think to me, you are our lead pastor, but just as we learn from you, we also learn from Pastor Clint, for Pastor Sampson, for Pastor Shannon. We need those people in our life, our coaches that help us get to where we want to go.
So good. Culture, you mentioned that a few times, and I think what we're talking about here is a culture that I think that the management and coach has worked hard to be able to establish over the last few years, because that doesn't come easy. But then the players leaned into it, and the players took it and ran with it. And I think you're seeing the success that they're experiencing right now because of a vision of culture that was desired, and then it was embraced. And now we're reaping some of the benefits of that culture that you guys are talking about. And I think it's something that we need to think about in our homes and our business and everything we do in life, and specifically in our church. And all that we do is the culture that honors Christ, that applies these principles, that is not self-serving, but are serving the organization, serving others, and serving the vision of the kingdom of God. Some of the things that stood out to me, and I just kind of mentioned this quickly, is one, the depth of the team. Incredible depth is so important. And I say this often. We talk about defense winning championships, and obviously our team was an incredible defense. But depth is absolutely crucial. Great champions, no matter what it is, it's not about having one superstar. It's about depth of people who can step in when they are needed. And we had that. And I think that if we would have had to utilize our bench more in the finals and stuff, we would have been okay. I really believe that if one of those others on the bench that did not get the playing time had to step in, they're going to step in too and do the job, and we would have got it accomplished. And then also was consistency. And I've already shown the shirt here that Shay said, the statement, the interview that stuck with people my whole life is consistency. And literally all the routines of his life is about doing them purposefully, intentionally, to build on something. And I encourage every person listening to be consistent. Be consistent in your time with God. Be consistent in your Bible reading. Be consistent in showing up at church. Being consistent to making it to a North group. Being consistent on just being kind and loving and caring and inviting other people into the journey with you and listening. Those things are very important, because oftentimes I see individuals that they will lend themselves to making right decisions for a short period of time, and then like, it's not working. No, it's about being consistent over long periods of time that makes for fruitfulness in life. And so I encourage people to lean in to consistency.
Good.
Now,
that is so good.
Go ahead.
I say that we always think that what makes a huge difference in our life are big decisions, but it's not really big decisions. It's small decisions every single day that make a huge difference. That's why I love our Bible reading plan. Reading one, it's only one chapter per day. From time to time, we'll have 2 to 3 Psalms. They're short, but just doing that every single day, just build that consistency. One day you figure out it's part of your routine. It's part of what you do. It's not about the big things. It's the little things every day.
I want you two to discuss these statements that were made by Coach Mark, and then also the general manager, Sam Presti. Sam Presti said this. He said that age is a number, maturity is a characteristic. I want y'all to think about that. And I want y'all just to kind of discuss that. Because I hear people say all the time, like, oh, maturity comes with age. Not necessarily. And then some people grow up fast, and this team grew up fast. And I think that, so I want to talk about that. And then second thing is Coach Mark had made a statement multiple times about this is an uncommon team. And they're uncommon because of some of the things we're talking about. Their selflessness, their willingness to celebrate each other. And it is really true that for a group of young men who are paid millions of dollars to dribble a basketball, that's all they've been doing. And they've always been in competition of others to be able to be the one rising to the top, but yet can come in And that's uncommon. And then just really embrace their roles, do what is needed to be for the success of the team, and celebrate one another, whether that be the star player with SGA or the person on the bench that gets the least amount of playing time. So I want you, those two statements, again, Sam Presti's age is a number, maturity is a characteristic. And then secondly, Coach Mark's statement about this is an uncommon team or uncommon players. What do you think?
Yeah, the maturity piece. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I think the maturity piece is an interesting statement from Presti, because I think Christian hit on it earlier. Like, even Shea, who's been in the league, 7 years now, 6 years, like, he's considered young, like, and generally speaking, but he's been around the block a little bit in the basketball world. And so he's mature in that way. But I think, like Christian said, putting Chris Paul around him when he was young so he can learn from his elders, learn from his leaders. He says Kobe was one of his favorite players. People are comparing him to MJ and the way he plays and stuff. And so it's like there's a maturity within that and who you surround yourself with. And yes, you can be young on paper. J-Dub and Chet can be young on paper, but they can grow up real quick. If the opportunity presents itself and you put the right people around you, you have the right coaching staff, you have the right medical staff, you have all these things, and you're willing to absorb and listen and grow from it. When those big opportunities come and opportunities in our lives hit where you have to grow up quick, you'll be prepared. So I think it's like in sports, you can look at teams and be like, yeah, they're really young, and this team's unique in that way where they were able to be super young and do something no team. I think they're the second youngest team to win an NBA Finals ever. And it's like they have both. They have the maturity because of the organization, because of the people around them, because of the people they've played with, because of guys like Caruso in the room that can help them. But then also on paper, they are young. But I think it's something that we all can, I think, look at and say, hey, like, how can I lean and look into the environments around me, lean on the elders around me, lean on people who know things, whether I'm a teenager, whether I'm a college student, whether I'm, my age, whatever, older people, like, just because it's a new experience doesn't mean you can't grow up quick in it, if you have the right people around you. So I think that's, for that statement, that's where that's a great quote, because I think sometimes we think, oh, well, I don't have this or I don't have that. And you can do it both. You can do both.
I think on that quote, it just reminds me of, I call them the Rodney Fouts quotes that I follow. It's one of something that you say often is, people say healing comes with time, but you always say it's not time. It's what you do with the time that really brings the healing. Maturity, yes, it can come with time, but if you don't do the work to mature, you can be 57 years old and be immature. And I think that it's in the quote that Sam Presti said, that their character has been developed because they have put the work and they have paid attention to the coaches. I think one word that I would just describe this team is like how humble they are. Again, that's culture. I think that's something they didn't show up being humble because they're used to being the biggest star in their school, the biggest stars where they came from. But I think being part of the culture that they have built, it's a culture of, we're going to help these kids mature quickly. Opportunities are going to present itself. Unfortunately, the point guard from the Pacers, Tyrese, I think is his name, right? I always say it wrong, so that's why I have a hard time even trying to attempt to say his last name. But he got hurt, unfortunately. But it was an opportunity for the other point guard to come up, right? Same thing. Chet got hurt. Somebody else had to step up. I always tell our residents, our church, and our younger leaders, you have to do the work when no one is looking, when nobody's watching, because an opportunity is going to show up, and it's going to be at a time that you might not expect it. For me, I have opportunities now to preach on the weekend. Well, if I have not put the work and actually practice sermons when nobody was watching in my room and thinking about things that how I would preach this specific verse and developing a deep, intimate relationship with God, when the opportunity presents itself, I will not be ready. So I'm always encouraging young people, no matter what age, do the work when nobody's watching, because there's going to be an opportunity, and your character and your discipline will be the reason why that door stays open. So I just love that Sam Presti just said about that, about those young men that.
So we're going to wrap it up here. And because I know that one of our special guests here has an important meeting, I think with SGA, maybe personal interview or something. But anyway, but I want to wrap it up here. And this is a great conversation. I could continue this for, hours on end. But Zack, give us some final thoughts maybe about being uncommon. And, this is an uncommon team, and just kind of wrap us up before we go.
I mean, I think you hit it on the head. This is an uncommon team, and I think Scripture calls us to be uncommon. I mean, when Jesus calls the disciples, he calls them to be uncommon. And I think in our culture, we typically think it's something bad if we don't fit in sometimes. And I think, I would tell people to like lean into being uncommon, because I mean, if you look at what Christ calls us to be, and I struggle with this too. It's like, I mean, he tells the Israelites this all the time. You're supposed to be different. You're supposed to be different than everybody else. You're supposed to be different than everybody else, which is uncommon. And I think we always in our society, for whatever reason, classify that as, well, something's wrong if you're uncommon. And so I think, but, just as a perfect use case of uncommon can make it to the mountaintop, And so I think in sports, you see that the teams that typically are uncommon are different, and they win. But I think the Bible tells us that, like, we're supposed to be, as believers, we're supposed to be uncommon. We're supposed to be different. We're supposed to have a different standard. And so that's kind of the correlation I put with those two. And that's something I think we all can just lean into.
Good.
So good. So good. Hey, I want to say thank you for joining us. And what an incredible way to end right there. That was powerful. And I hope you out there that are listening or you're watching this, share this with somebody. I believe it'll be encouraging for them. Also, and there's some Thunder fans that maybe can learn something from this. Maybe even somebody who doesn't go to church, even believe in Christ. Share this with them, and I believe it will help them out. Christian, thank you very much. Zack, thank you very much. And everybody listening, I'm so glad that you joined us. Share this with somebody else, okay, that is out there. And we will see you next time on Up and to the Right.